This has to be the worst case of child SA that I have ever read about, to the point where it's so hard to find details about what actually happened online because it's that bad. Huge trigger warning, we're talking about children and SA, so if you think that listening to this is going to harm your mental health in any way, please skip this video. And guys, I cannot express enough how much I mean it. Like, your mental health is number one priority, so please take care of yourselves, but this is not going to be an easy one to listen to. In this case, there are 5 generations of family members all having kids with one another. We're going to Nova Scotia today in Canada, specifically an area called South Mountain. Very quiet, very remote, very isolated. That is where William Goler was born to his parents, Stella and Charles. He was one of 8 children, so the Goler family was a family of 10. Additionally, there were also grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, you name it. And all of those extended family members also lived in that same house. So it was a full house, to say the least. And the Golers were known as, quote, mountain folk. The house they lived in was away from everyone and everything, aka the perfect place to go if you want to commit a crime and hide whatever it is that you're doing. It was also incredibly filthy and dirty as a result of 1, not having any money, 2, having so many people in there, and 3, just a lack of cleaning. The land surrounding the house was completely unkept. Trash was everywhere, inside and out. The furniture was stinky and stained. There was no toilet, only a hole in the ground, no shower. No one ever cleaned up after themselves. It was moist in there, like when you walked in, the air felt wet, full of bugs all the time. It just was not a pleasant house to live in, I imagine. On top of that, they lived in poverty, so finances were pretty much non-existent. The family would go out looking for berries to pick and eat. They would try to find food from farms nearby to find something to eat. Sometimes they would go fishing. They were barely getting by. And the children were the ones that were forced to do everything: hard labor, cooking, emptying the hole, which was the toilet. They did all of the chores. They were also severely neglected. I mean, the adults didn't even take care of themselves, let alone the children. No love or attention was ever shown inside of that household whatsoever. The children probably didn't even understand the concept of love because they were never shown it. And also, from a very young age, they were told that they were to engage in intimate activities with their family members, with their own siblings and mothers and fathers. The Goler family had a history of reproducing with one another. I think it started in the 1860s, and today's story takes place in the 1970s/80s. So this had been going on in the family for well over 100 years. But at some point, all those years ago, a man had a baby with his sister, and it just started a snowball effect. That's the way that the Goler family would continue to grow, with brothers and sisters having babies together. And because of that, many of the Golers were born with disabilities, both mental and physical. If you didn't know, when relatives have children with each other, their DNA overlaps, obviously, and that overlap makes the chances of recessive genes for various defects and disorders greater by a lot. So with every new generation, the Goler family's children were born with even more severe mental and physical disabilities, and it just kept getting worse. And those disabilities affected them a lot, to the point that William was not even able to make it past the 5th grade because he just couldn't, and a lot of his siblings could not either. However, you will notice throughout the course of this video that William, even though he was considered to be uneducated, he was sharper and more advanced mentally than his siblings. And he knew that, and he took advantage of that. William also had anger issues. He had a really bad temper. Anything could make him angry or frustrated, and when he was upset, everyone around him would know. He was kind of unhinged. And what once started off as a choice to grow their family within their family, to have babies with each other, it somehow ended up becoming a strict rule. So at the time of this story, it was expected that all of the children would grow up only to have their own children with either their mom, dad, grandpa, sibling, cousins, aunt, uncle. Like, nothing was off the table. Leaving the family also was not an option. When William was 24 years old in 1969, he married a 16-year-old girl named Hazel. She actually was not a direct family member of his, but she was 16 years old. She was a child, and she was forced not only by the adults in her family, but also from William's family, forced into this marriage, and also forced to start having children almost immediately after. So they get married. They have 3 children. William is now a husband and a father, and there's this sort of dynamic switch within the household. William becomes the leader, for a lack of a better word. Suddenly, his parents, his siblings, his extended family members all start looking at William as the new person in charge, all start looking at him as the head of the family. Whatever he said, they did, and he loved that. He made most of the decisions in his family. For one, he decided that all of the adults should go out and get a job and then hand over their paychecks to him. He was also now fully in charge of telling the kids what to do, even if they were not his kids. He would boss around everyone in the house and decide what what exact role everyone was to play inside of the household. He also dictated on who people in the Goler family could or could not be friends with. He ran a tight ship, okay? And he was the toughest on his own 3 kids. And this is kind of the part where we start talking about the severe punishments that went on inside of that household. So another warning, we're talking about kids. The punishments against the kids that happened in the household from the adults, mostly from the men, they were awful. And there was a punishment for everything, because even though the house was quite literally falling apart, William would still order the children around to move trash, carry furniture from one place to another, chop wood, whatever it was. If William told you to do something and you didn't do it, you would be in serious trouble. Even things such as William deciding which kids would get to go to school and which kids wouldn't, he set the weirdest rules in place just because he could. And when his rules would be broken, he would gather up all the adult men in the house, which were 15 adult men, to punish and hurt the kids, not only psychologically, physically, but also. And he would target the children from the time that they were toddlers just because he could, because they were the most vulnerable and they could not defend themselves. Some of the punishments included being thrown down the stairs, being shoved into small places that they could not fit into, being forced in there and forced to stay there for hours. Different hard objects such as wooden panels being used on them until they were black and blue. They would use fear, isolation, and threats to keep them scared from the outside world so they wouldn't leave. And then there was a dog. William had a dog that he specifically trained to bite people, and when the kids misbehaved, he would release the dog and order it to go and bite the child. But probably worst of all, like I mentioned, was the SA, and there was a lot of intimate relations going on between family members. But when it came to the adults, they chose to do it most of the time, but when it came to the kids, they had no say. They were forced to do it whether they wanted to or not, and oftentimes this would result in pregnancy. William essayed his own daughter for the first time when she was only 5 years old, and then it turned into at least a weekly basis. William also essayed children in the family that were not his own, so his nieces and nephews. William's other daughters also experienced essay from a very, very young age, not only from their own father, but also from every other male adult in the house. One of the victims later said that William would allow anyone to essay his own kids, and said that the kids would be forced to line up against the wall, and the adults would come in and pick out which one they wanted to essay. They would choose one or multiple, whatever they wanted. William would also let strangers come into the house and pick a child that they wanted to essay. And then they would, and oftentimes the children would be forced to watch. And as another form of punishment, sometimes the adults would force the children to do it to each other. It was the worst thing that you could possibly imagine. At times, there were more than 2 people involved in the act. The adult women, by the way, were more oftentimes than not the ones that were holding the kids down when they were resisting. In one of the bedrooms, there were 4 girls that shared that bedroom, and in the middle of the night, when they would hear William walking up the stairs, they knew that he was coming for one of them. One of those 4 girls later said that she learned how to fake sleeping, slow down her breathing, and she learned how to fake snore, just hoping and praying that William would pick someone else instead of her. It was so bad that some of the injuries included tearing from both the front and the back. Sometimes the kids would even have trouble walking the next day because they would be in so much pain. One of the men inside the house got his 15-year-old daughter pregnant. A grandfather got his granddaughter pregnant. Every single child in that house, boys, girls, they were all subjected to SA weekly, if not daily. Nothing was off limits. It was inhumane. So that gives you a very, very small idea of the kind of punishments that the children were subjected to. But William also had rewards. The kids would have to do things to earn a reward, but the reward was that you would get an entire day off from being essayed. That was the reward that William had to offer. You literally cannot make this up. When William was in his 30s, his wife Hazel had to go away and be at the hospital for a little while. In the meantime, he found himself a new girlfriend who was pretty much the girl version of him, Wanda. She's terrible, maybe even worse than him, but they were fully together. So Hazel ends up recovering in hospital and she comes back to the house, but William refuses to get rid of his girlfriend Wanda, and he tells Hazel that he should be allowed to have both, a wife and a girlfriend. Hazel was not happy about this, but she didn't know what to do. So for a while, William, Hazel, and Wanda all shared a bed together, and both women were not happy about it. So the situation was messy. They were constantly fighting and their fights would get ugly. That went on for a while until Hazel eventually was like, I can't do this anymore. This is too much. And she left. She moved out, leaving her and William's 3 children behind. Wanda, William's girlfriend, like I said, was pretty much the girl version of him, but you could argue that she was worse. She would participate in punishments and in the essay just as much as William on the children who were as young as 3 years old, using not only her own hands, but also objects. And it got to the point that she became the main adult that the children were scared of, which says a lot because we know how terrible William was. And Wanda was the worst to William's daughters. Sandra was one of William's daughters. She was struggling a lot mentally. Her mental health was in such a dark place from everything that she was being put through, and she started to feel like she would be better off just not being here at all. She ran away twice. Both times she ran away to go get help from adults in the outside world, telling them what was going on at home, but both times authorities did not believe her. And all they did was put her in the back of a cop car and drove her right back home, straight back to that house. I cannot imagine how defeating and soul crushing that must have felt for her. And of course, when she got back home, she was punished for running away severely. But now we get to 1984, where finally, luckily, 14-year-old Sandra Goler would confide in someone from her school who would thankfully believe her. On January 21st of 1984, Sandra got in trouble at school for not paying attention. As a result, she was made to go stand out in the hallway. When she was alone in the hallway, she burst into tears because suddenly all of the emotions that she had been trying her best to hold in, it just became too much. She broke down. One of the teachers walking in the hallway noticed that she was crying. She approached her and asked her what was wrong, and Sandra just responded with, quote, "My father has been using me as a wife," end quote. Then she told that teacher everything, and that teacher was absolutely horrified at what she was hearing, because any normal person would be. The teacher told Sandra that she believed her, that she would be okay, and that she would help her, and that she would not let her be sent back to that house of horrors. A social worker was then called into the school, and Sandra then described in details the years of essay that her and all of the other children in the Goler house had been subjected to at the hands of the adults. She told the social worker that it happened every other day and that her father was one of the main adults who did it and encouraged it. That social worker and the teacher then called the police, who interviewed Sandra even more, which I know is necessary, and I'm so glad that so many adults wanted to listen to her and believed her and wanted to help her. But I just feel, I can't help but feel so sorry for her that she had to sit there and describe in detail the worst things that have ever happened to her over and over and over again. But I'm just glad that they finally listened. By the end of the day, authorities put Sandra in the care of CPS because they were not going to make her go back to the house. So she didn't go home that night, and William just assumed that she ran away again. Police officers, though, didn't want to rush immediately over to the house because the Goler family, many of the adults were known to have anger issues. They were also really big hunters, meaning that they had a lot of weapons at their house. So they decided that a safer way to do it would be to wait until the next day, wait until more of the Goler children were at school, and then pull them to class and remove them that way. The following day, authorities pulled the kids from class to interview them as well. And at first they didn't want to talk because they were so scared of William and Wanda. But eventually, after some time, they talked. They confessed everything again, confirming everything that Sandra had said and confirming that they too were victims of SA at the hands of William, Wanda, their own brothers, fathers, uncles, and sisters, brother, cousins, etc. Once they had most of the children safe, officers headed to the house. They knocked on the door. William answered, and he invited them inside. And officers were shocked yet again, this time at just how filthy and disgusting and dirty the house was. Everything in the house was damp. It smelled like mold. There were bugs on every surface, flies all around the house. It was so bad. The 9 adults who were home at that time, including William and Wanda, were arrested and taken into the station to be interviewed. The remaining adults, which were 5 others, were also eventually taken into the police station for questioning. William denied everything because of course he did, but some of the other adults just told the officers everything. They spoke in detail about what they had done to the children, but by the way that they were talking about it like it was the most casual thing in the world. And some of them even told investigators that the children were the ones initiating everything because they were asking for it to happen, because they wanted it to happen to them, which is unbelievable. Like, it couldn't actually register in their minds just how messed up and vile and wrong their actions were. They refused to take any responsibility. Some of them didn't even see anything wrong at all with their actions. 13 Goler adults were charged with over 150 different charges for everything that they had done to the children, who were aged from 5 to 14 years old, and they all received jail sentences. But this is going to make you so angry. William was the one that was handed the longest sentence, and guess how long it was? 7 years. Wanda sentenced to 4 years. All of the other adults sentenced to 1 to 3 years. So they served their sentences, and then they just went back to the house. and continued living their life, doing God knows what. The children ended up being placed in foster care, and they were happy about that because obviously the way that they were living there was magical in comparison to the way that they were living before. But really sadly, William's 3 daughters that all loved each other very, very much, they were really close, they all got adopted by different families because they couldn't find a family that wanted all 3 of them, which is really sad. And then they ended up losing touch with each other, which is really sad. Again, finding information on this case was so hard. It felt impossible. Like, I was Googling things and I was like, am I like misspelling their name? Like, why can I not find anything? So I think most of the children were adopted, but there's not that much information on it. Yeah, this is one of the ones that like makes you take a step back and think, like, question humanity, because how? Anyway, that is all I have for today's case. Let me know if you guys have heard about this one before. I'm actually curious, and let me know what your thoughts are on it. Thank you for spending time with me today. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Also, I know my eyes look so irritated. They probably do in other videos as well, but I have the world's most sensitive eyeballs, so they look really red. Sorry. Love you guys so much, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.